So I want to take a moment to go through just 3 more examples so you have a video dedicated to just writing these polynomials of least degree. So we're going to start easy. We're going to build our way up, as you can see here. Easy means we have these nice whole number zeros or roots. So remember, each of these come from a given factor. So x minus 2 actually comes from x plus 2. X equals negative 5 comes from x plus 5. And x equals negative 1 comes from x plus 1, just comes from the opposite of whatever your given root was. From here, completely up to you. You want to multiply 2 at a time. So if we want to take the first 2 and multiply those out, you're just foiling. X times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 5 is 10. And then you would clean that up and combine your like terms. And some of you might be able to do that in your head and not need to write out all of these steps. From here, then it's a matter of distributing. So if you distribute the x squared to both of these, so x squared times x is x cubed, x squared times 1 is x squared. Then we would multiply the 7x to each of them. Again, it's completely up to you how you multiply. You just know you can only multiply 2 things at a time, or 2 sets of parentheses at a time. And then your goal is to combine any like terms that you have. Okay, so from this point, you would create your function f of least degree by combining all of your like terms. Okay, and this would be our given function. And if we were to solve that, we would get back to all those roots we had in the beginning. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 3, same thing. So the only difference is now we have this radical here. And what you want to be aware of is every time when we solved radicals, when we were solving quadratics, if we had a radical solution, we had a positive and a negative. So that means when I start listing out these roots, I do have to make sure I have one just for the positive and one just for the negative of it. So the positive one comes from x minus 1, positive 4 comes from x minus 4. And then I have my positive square root of 2 and my negative square root of 2. Always make sure you have one of each with your radical, one positive, one negative. From here, I always suggest start by multiplying your radicals together. Your goal is to look for any whole value terms, multiply them, and then you group your radicals together. So for instance, we have an x times an x. That's going to get me an x squared. If I had other whole values that were identical, they would go in that grouping too. One's positive, one's negative. When we multiply, we get a negative sign. And then radical 2 times radical 2 is a radical 2 squared. Okay, and then we would clean that up. So easy enough, x squared is just x squared. Square root of 2 squared is 2. And then again, I continue multiplying and grouping things together. So if I multiply these 2 out next, I'm going to get x squared minus 5x plus 4. Again, I'm kind of skipping some of the steps. We should know how to multiply polynomials together, especially with foiling. And then again, from here, it's a matter of distributing. So x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. X squared times negative 2 is negative 2x squared. Negative 5x times x squared is a negative 5x cubed. Negative 5x times negative 2 is a positive 10x. 4 times x squared is 4x squared. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. And then again, we want to put it in standard form. So we want to combine any like terms we can and be sure that we write them in standard form, biggest polynomial, decreasing all the way down. Okay. All right, and our last one, number 5 over here. So again, same thing happens. I have 5 whole number, I have 0 whole number, and then I have negative 3 plus radical 5. That means I also need to include negative 3 minus radical 5 when I start listing these out. 5 comes from x minus 5. 0 comes from just x. If it makes you feel better, you can write x plus 0. Then we always go based off of the whole number. So this is minus 3. A negative 3 would have come from an x plus 3. And then you stick its baggage with it. Its baggage meaning its radicals. That has to go with the value that you are putting in there. Again, negative 3 would have come from x plus 3. And I take its baggage of the radicals with it. So I'm going to start again with the radical section. I notice right away this x plus 3 is completely identical in both. And it should make sense that it was because they both started with a minus 3. So that is identical. And we have our identical radicals at the end. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this. We got x minus 5. X plus 0 is just x. Then I'm going to group my like terms. So x plus 3 and x plus 3 becomes x plus 3 squared. Remember, we're multiplying them. If I multiply something times itself, it's a square. Then plus and minus make it a negative. And then I got my radical. Radical 5 times itself is a radical 5 squared. Okay. Again, from this point, I want to simplify what I can. So x plus 3, you're going to write it twice and FOIL it. So to save time and save steps, when I multiply that out, you're going to get x squared plus 6x plus 9. Remember, write it twice, FOIL it. Square root of 5 squared, that just drops out. And then I can clean it up. So we get x squared plus 6x plus 4. Now you could have even been multiplying this front end together, because that's not hard at all either. You can multiply, that part first and then deal with your radicals. It doesn't matter. Multiplication is commutative, means you can multiply it in any order that you want to. Okay, so I'm going to multiply these front ends now at this point, x squared minus 5x. And then I can multiply that into the polynomial that I have in the back end. So x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. X squared times 6x is 6x cubed. X squared times 4 is 4x squared. Then we do the 5s. So negative 5x times x squared is negative 5x cubed. Negative 5x times 6x is a negative 30x squared. And then negative 5x times 4 is a negative 20x. And again, from here, I would clean up, combine all my like terms, get x to the 4th plus x cubed minus 26x squared minus 20x as your final answer. Okay, so again, don't let the radicals scare you. If you can remember this part up here where we can group together those things that are identical, and then that gets rid of your radical for you. It makes your life so much easier as you go through and do your multiplication.